Welcome back. Well, today I am joined by Dr. John Bahadrani, who is here on behalf of MemorialCare Internal Medicine and Interventional Cardiology. Well, Dr. Bahadrani, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
We talked a little bit off camera, and man, you told me how many surgeries you do in a day, and that just is astonishing, like 10 or more. And I know you said it's not as invasive as regular surgery, but nonetheless, you have to be tired when you go home.
Some nights I'm very tired.
All right, so today we're talking about AFib and the Watchman Flex. But before we do that, tell me just a little bit about yourself so we can remind our residents who you are and how long you've been with Memorial Care.
Sure. I'm an interventional cardiologist. This is a subsection of cardiology. We kind of have been dubbed the plumbers of the heart, which basically means that I've done additional training beyond cardiology to be able to do interventions on the heart. And so I started out in academia at the University of California in San Diego, and then moved into private practice. And I've been here with Memorial Care for approximately 5.5 years.
Okay. All right, great. And being down in San Diego, what did you love it down there?
I did. My wife and I, we lived in La Jolla, and it's a beautiful area. I'm originally from Texas, and so
Oh.
it was a tremendous change, and we loved it. But we love Orange County just as equally.
Yeah, there's a lot of great places, and you can still visit San Diego. It's not too far away.
That's right.
So tell me what AFib is and what are the common symptoms of it?
Sure. So atrial fibrillation is probably one of the most common arrhythmias that we have. It's estimated that it impacts approximately 6 to 8 million people in this country.
Mhm.
And what it is it's an arrhythmia that develops from the top chambers of the heart. And instead of the top chamber of the heart squeezing or beating regularly, it starts to fibrillate.
Okay.
And there's a few symptoms that are concerning that we worry about. Um, People that go into atrial fibrillation can feel symptoms of fatigue. They can feel quite short of breath when they go to exert themselves. And if the heart rhythm is fast enough, you can get lightheaded and even have chest discomfort or pass out.
Hmm. Hmm.
The most substantial consequence of atrial fibrillation is the risk of stroke.
Right.
Uh, because as you can imagine, if the top chamber of the heart is no longer squeezing, but instead is fibrillating, blood will basically swirl and become stagnant, and it can form clots. And then those clots can shoot and go to the brain and cause a stroke.
Right. Now the interesting thing, my 91-year-old father just had a situation very similar to this, but it was caused by a clogged artery in his neck.
Uh-huh.
So the plaque and that buildup of that's inside the arteries is what is causing this heart irregularity, correct?
So plaque buildup and blockages in the arteries of the heart is one cause of atrial fibrillation. There are a number of other causes. We in the United States, we have a very aging population, and age by itself is a risk factor. And we know that the longer someone lives, the longer the likelihood that they'll develop this arrhythmia. Other possible causes of the arrhythmia include valve abnormalities. So if you have, for instance, your heart valves that don't open or close very well, and you have a leak in the valve, that can cause atrial fibrillation. Blood pressure abnormalities over time can cause atrial fibrillation. Thyroid abnormalities can cause atrial fibrillation. There
Mm.
does seem to be a genetic component as well. And then there's a few environmental components that can be cause of atrial fibrillation. Probably the most notable would be the amount of caffeine consumption.
Uh-oh. Yeah, because we love our coffee here in I think this country, and we do drink a lot of coffee. So tell me how does, like, at what point should we be concerned about consuming too much caffeine?
So the caffeine consumption that I'm speaking of is a very high volume of caffeine consumption. So the average American is probably not hitting that amount.
Okay.
But if you're somebody who is doing, 2 or 3 espresso shots a day, or you're doing those energy or stimulant drinks such as Red Bulls, um, then those are the kind of situations where I would say you're putting yourself at risk for this arrhythmia.
Okay. Now, I know that there are medications that you obviously can use for blood pressure and medications, blood thinners to help with some of these issues. But at some point, those are not going to work, and then they would come see you. Is that correct?
That's correct. So, we have two prongs of attack when we look at atrial fibrillation. The first prong is controlling the heart rate or the rhythm. So we have antiarrhythmic medications which will attempt to maintain the patient in a sinus or normal heart rhythm,
Hmm.
or we have medications that we can put that will keep the heart rate from spiking too fast. Okay.
Okay.
And then the second prong of the treatment is the actual reduction of stroke risk. And so the primary option there has been for the longest time blood thinners.
Hmm.
Blood thinners come with a variety of risks and issues. And so we have an alternative to that now, which is what we're going to be talking about in a little bit, which is the Watchman device. And the reason why this came about is because blood thinners can be a very much a burden on people. Not only do they carry a substantial risk of bleeding, but they limit people in their lifestyle and their abilities to do things because of the risk of bleeding. And also, the newer agents can be quite expensive.
Oh, so how long has the Watchman procedure been out?
So the Watchman procedure actually has been out for a very long time. It's approaching past a decade, actually.
Wow. Okay.
But it's gone through a reiteration, and it has become more, I would say, kind of mainstream,
Okay.
and it's being more adopted across the country as an alternative. And it's very exciting for us because when it originally was being rolled out, it was being rolled out as an alternative for patients that were very high risk of having a stroke,
Okay.
but were also at very high risk of having a bleeding issue. And we felt that they were not suitable candidates for long-term blood thinners.
Okay.
And while that's still true, there's a growing body of literature that is looking at this option as being a very competitive alternative for all individuals that have atrial fibrillation.
Wow. So then are you saying that once you've evaluated somebody and they're not on blood thinners now, you would use this procedure as opposed to giving them blood thinners?
That's correct. I see a future where this device will be an alternative strategy to reducing the risk of stroke in patients with atrial fibrillation so
Wow.
that we don't have to be doing blood thinners anymore.
Okay, so what if somebody came to you and they were already on blood thinners? Could you take them off blood thinners and do the procedure?
Right. So the procedure itself requires you to stay on blood thinners for 45 days after the procedure. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And the reason for that is that for the first 45 days, we want to make sure that the device is positioned and has adequately been sealed in terms of the result with the appendage closure.
Uh-huh.
Once we verify that at 45 days, then the patient will be able to come off of blood thinners. And after the blood thinners are removed, they'll continue with a baby aspirin and a medicine called Plavix for 6 months. And
Okay.
then at the end of 6 months, the Plavix goes away and it's just lifelong baby aspirin.
Wow, that's really cool. So tell me, what is the new procedure? I mean, what have they done to it to make it so versatile?
Right. So they've changed the device. I wish I had one to show you, but basically it's a metal device that has a mesh, and it looks like a parachute.
Okay.
The parachute is the mesh part of the device. And if you can imagine the strings of a parachute, then that would be the metal in the device. And they've gone through some reiterations to make the device more rounded, And so it's much more safer when we're deploying it into the appendage.
Okay. Okay.
When
Awesome.
you looked at the original studies on the first generation device, we were quoting complication rates of anywhere between 1 to 4% with the procedure. With this new device, the complication rates are much lower, less than 1%.
Oh, that's great. That is really nice. Now, what about recovery? Is it easier on somebody now?
Very much so. So generally, the flow is that you come in, the procedure's done, you stay one night in the hospital, and you go home the following day. And we ask that for the first 24 to 48 hours, you kind of take it easy. Regular activity is fine, and then after about a week, you're back to full normal jogging, exercise, whatever type of activity you were doing beforehand.
Wow. And then let me ask you one last thing regarding taking somebody off the blood thinners. So once they've gone through the process that you mentioned, what are the advantages of them not being on a blood thinner?
Tremendous. So I can give you different types of scenarios or examples where somebody would benefit. But let's say that you're an active individual who enjoys sailing or enjoys doing physical activity like boxing or football, things like that. You're an individual who might be younger and are playing these contact sports, and blood thinners pose a substantial risk. And so that coming off of that would be a tremendous benefit. Another patient would be maybe an older patient who has had problems with gastrointestinal bleeding. And as a result of that, they can't take the blood thinners. And so you would have this as an alternative to still have the stroke reduction risk, but not have the bleeding risk. Another patient would be maybe someone who has had a stroke and has had bleeding into the brain, which we call as a hemorrhagic stroke. That's another patient that would be benefiting this procedure. And then finally, one that we don't think about very often is sometimes these drugs can be up to $400 $500 a month if you fall in the donut hole of your insurance. And so compliance becomes an issue. So if you can't afford the medication, you're not going to take it, and you put yourself at the risk of stroke. And so this is another strategy that you can use to basically mitigate the risk of stroke while also enforcing compliance.
Wow, great examples. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting us know about this. I think it's going to be really popular in terms of, maybe having choices. So I think that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very excited for the future. And, it's interesting. We, in MemorialCare at Saddleback, we're on track to be one of the highest volume centers in Orange County for this procedure.
Wow, well, your 10 to 12 surgeries each day is going to keep going. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be right back after this.